Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today for what's going to be, I think, a really important conversation.
Yeah.
We're talking about heroin overdose today,
hmm
and this is something that's been in the news a lot lately.
Absolutely.
We've got this article here from the Rolling Hills Recovery Center, heroin overdose, symptoms, signs, and prevention.
hmm
We're going to break down the key takeaways with you guys, but
Right.
it's kind of chilling. Between 2020 and 2021, drug overdose deaths in the U.S. jumped by like almost 30%.
Yeah,
And opioids were involved in 7 out of every 10 of those cases.
it's true.
So this is some serious stuff we need to understand better.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's really concerning about heroin is that, unlike some drugs that might just give you like a temporary high or something like that,
Right.
heroin actually changes the way your brain works, like fundamentally.
Okay. Yeah, that's a little unsettling.
Yeah.
Could you explain that a little more? Like, what exactly is happening in the brain when someone uses heroin?
Well, so heroin, being an opioid, it kind of works by attaching itself to certain receptors in your brain.
Okay.
And these receptors, they deal with things like pain and pleasure. And when the heroin latches on, it triggers this like huge release of dopamine,
Mm-hmm.
which is the neurotransmitter, basically a chemical in your brain that
Wow.
makes you feel good, reward and euphoria.
It's like tricking the brain into thinking something great just happened.
Yeah, it's basically hijacking the brain's reward system. You got it.
Wow.
But here's the problem. Over time, your brain kind of gets used to all that extra dopamine.
Right.
It's like it doesn't get as excited by it anymore.
So it takes more and more to get the same effect.
Exactly. That's tolerance.
And dependent.
And dependence, that's where the risk of overdosers really starts to climb because people need more and more just to feel anything.
And it's suppressing the things that keep them alive, too, like breathing.
Yeah, that's the really dangerous part. Heroin slows down your breathing, your heart rate, all those vital functions.
Okay, so let's say someone, is witnessing what they think might be an overdose.
Right.
What should they be looking for? Like, how can you tell?
The most important thing is to watch their breathing.
Oh, okay.
Are they gasping for air? Are they taking really shallow breaths?
Uh,
And look at their skin. Is it pale? Or even kind of bluish, especially around the lips and fingertips?
that's terrifying.
Yeah, it's a scary situation.
So what else? Besides the breathing, what other signs are there?
Well, you might see their pupils get really tiny, like pinpoints.
Okay.
They might seem confused, disoriented. They could even lose consciousness.
Oh, wow.
And in severe cases, you might see seizures, coma, even that really scary sound people call the death rattle.
It sounds like every second counts in this situation.
It really does.
So what's the very first thing someone should do if they think they're seeing an overdose?
Call 911 immediately. Don't wait. Don't hesitate.
I know some people might be afraid to call, because heroin is illegal. But isn't there something that protects people who call for help in these situations?
Yeah, a lot of states have these Good Samaritan laws
Right.
that basically say if you call 911 for an overdose, you're not going to get in trouble, even if you were using drugs too.
Okay, good. Good to know.
The priority is saving lives.
Absolutely. So you've called 911.
Right.
What do you do while you're waiting for them to get there? Anything.
The most important thing is to make sure they're breathing.
Okay.
Check for a pulse, and if they're not breathing and you know how to do rescue breathing, start that immediately.
And I've heard there's a medication called Narcan or naloxone that can reverse an overdose.
Right, naloxone's amazing stuff.
How does it work?
Well, it blocks the opioid receptors in the brain.
Yeah.
So basically, it kicks the heroin off those receptors.
So like an antidote.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's getting easier to find. Often you don't even need a prescription.
So if you think you might be in a situation where you could encounter an overdose, it's a good idea to have it on hand.
Definitely. And know how to use it.
Like a fire extinguisher, you hope you never need it, but if you do.
You're really glad you have it.
Exactly. And even just knowing the signs of an overdose and being ready to act can make all the difference.
It really can. Being prepared can save a life.
Absolutely.
And even if someone does survive an overdose,
Right.
the effects of heroin use, they can be pretty devastating in the long run.
Yeah, the article talked about how heroin can change the actual structure of the brain over time.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah, can you talk a bit more about that?
So heroin, like other addictive drugs, It messes with the brain's reward system.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about it triggering that dopamine rush?
Yeah?
Well, with repeated use, the brain starts to rely on that heroin to produce those good feelings.
So the brain gets kind of numb to its own natural reward.
Exactly. And as a result, the user might find it hard to enjoy things they used to love, you know?
Like hobbies, relationships, stuff like that.
Exactly. They might even struggle to enjoy food. It's like they need the heroin just to feel normal.
That's so
And it
sad.
goes beyond just the emotional and psychological.
Right, there's the physical stuff too.
Oh, absolutely. Long-term heroin use can lead to a whole bunch of physical health problems.
Like what?
Collapsed veins, skin infections, heart problems, liver disease, breathing issues, you name it.
That's a lot.
And because heroin is often injected, there's a high risk of getting bloodborne diseases like HIV and Hep C.
Especially if people are sharing needles.
Right. It's just a cascade of bad consequences.
And then there's withdrawal.
Oh,
I've heard it's like pure agony.
it's pretty brutal.
It
Makes it so bad. So when someone stops using heroin suddenly, their body freaks out.
Okay.
It's been so used to having the drug, and now it's gone.
So the body's trying to find its balance again.
Yeah, exactly. And that leads to a whole bunch of horrible symptoms.
Like what kinds of symptoms are we talking about?
Muscle aches, bone pain, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, chills, sweats, insomnia, anxiety, agitation.
Wow, that sounds awful.
And on top of all that, the cravings are super intense.
I bet. So trying to quit cold turkey is like super dangerous.
It's incredibly risky, yeah, and usually unsuccessful.
So that's why people go to detox.
Right. Medically supervised detox is really important for people trying to get off heroin.
So detox is all about managing those withdrawal symptoms,
Exactly. They can give you medications to help with the symptoms and make sure you're safe.
like a safety net during the toughest part.
Exactly. But it's really just the first step.
Right, because detox is just the physical part.
Right. The real work is dealing with the underlying stuff that led to the addiction in the first place.
Okay, so that's where therapy comes in.
Exactly. Therapy is crucial for helping people understand why they started using heroin in the first place.
To get to the root of it.
Exactly. And it also gives them a safe space to learn healthy ways to cope with stress and cravings.
So they're learning new tools to deal with life without needing heroin.
Right. And as they go through recovery, they also start building a support system.
Like people who understand what they're going through.
Exactly. They might go to 12-step meetings, connect with a sponsor, or build relationships with others in recovery.
That sense of community must be so helpful.
It's huge. Knowing you're not alone can make all the difference.
And as people keep going in recovery, they start to rediscover themselves, right?
Exactly. They start rebuilding their lives, reconnecting with loved ones, finding things they're passionate about.
It's like they're getting their lives back.
Exactly. Recovery is about so much more than just not using drugs.
It's about healing and finding purpose.
Exactly. It's about living a meaningful life.
But it's not always easy, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the toughest challenges people face in recovery?
Well, one of the hardest things is dealing with cravings.
Even after they've been sober for a while.
Even after years, cravings can pop up out of nowhere.
Wow.
And they can be really intense.
So it's a constant battle.
It can feel that way sometimes, but the good news is the cravings usually get weaker and less frequent over time.
Okay, that's good.
And with the right support and coping skills, people can learn to manage them without relapsing.
And I imagine triggers are a big part of that.
Oh yeah, triggers are huge.
Like certain people, places, or even just feelings that bring back those cravings.
Exactly. Learning to identify and manage those triggers is really important for staying sober.
So it's about having a plan, right? Knowing what to do when those triggers pop up.
Exactly. It's about being proactive and having strategies in place, like removing yourself from a risky situation or reaching out for support.
Or using healthy coping mechanisms like exercise or meditation.
Exactly. It's about being prepared.
And it's important to remember that relapse is a part of recovery for a lot of people.
It's true. It happens, and it doesn't mean they've failed.
It's just a bump in the road.
Exactly. It's a chance to learn and adjust their treatment plan and recommit to sobriety.
To get back up and keep going.
You got it. Recovery is a marathon, not a sprint.
You'll stumble along the way.
But it's about getting back up and learning from those setbacks.
And that's what defines success, right? Not being perfect, but being resilient.
Exactly. It's about striving for a healthier life.
That's so powerful.
Right.
And I think one of the biggest takeaways here is that there's always hope.
Absolutely. Hope is everything.
It's the belief that things can get better,
that recovery is possible.
and that life can be beautiful again,
That's what keeps people going
one step at a time.
towards a brighter future.
So we've talked a lot about, the dark side of heroin addiction.
Yeah.
But now I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about recovery.
Okay.
I mean, it's hopeful to think about, but what does that even look like?
Right. Well, it's important to remember that recovery is different for everyone.
Okay.
It's a journey, not a destination, and there are going to be bumps along the way.
So it's not like you just reach this finish line and everything's perfect.
No, not at all. It's an ongoing process
Of what?
of growth, healing, learning new skills, building healthy habits, finding ways to stay sober for the long haul.
Okay, so where does it even start? What are the first steps?
Well, we talked about detox, right?
Yeah.
That's usually the first step to get the person medically stable.
Right, to get through those initial withdrawal symptoms safely.
Exactly. And then after that, usually comes intensive therapy.
Okay.
This could be inpatient, residential, or outpatient, depending on the person's needs.
And what do they do in therapy?
Well, they work with therapists to really understand the root of their addiction.
To figure out what led them to heroin in the first place.
Exactly, whether it's trauma, mental health issues, or just difficult life circumstances.
So they're not just treating the addiction, they're treating the whole person.
Exactly. And therapy also gives them the tools to cope with cravings and triggers in healthy ways.
So they're learning new ways to deal with life without relying on heroin.
That's the goal. And as people go through recovery, they also start building a sober support network.
People who understand what they're going through.
Exactly. They might go to 12-step meetings, find a sponsor, or connect with others in recovery.
That must be so helpful.
It is. It makes a huge difference to know you're not alone.
And as they keep going in their recovery, they start to rediscover who they are.
Right. Absolutely. They rebuild their lives, reconnect with loved ones, and start doing things they enjoy.
It's like getting a second chance.
It is. It's about reclaiming your life and finding joy again.
But it's not always easy, right?
No, there are definitely challenges.
Like what?
One of the biggest ones is cravings.
Even after they've been sober for a while.
Even after years, cravings can still pop up.
Wow.
It takes a lot of strength and resilience to resist them.
I can imagine. So it's a constant battle.
It can feel that way, but they do get weaker over time.
That's good.
And with the right support and coping skills, people can learn to manage them without relapsing.
And triggers are a big part of that too, right?
Oh, yeah, triggers are huge.
Like certain people, places, or even emotions that can bring back those cravings.
Exactly. So learning to identify and manage those triggers is crucial for staying sober.
So you got to have a plan, right? Like what to do when you encounter a trigger.
It's about being proactive, having strategies in place to cope.
Like removing yourself from a risky situation or reaching out for support.
Exactly. Or using healthy coping mechanisms like exercise or meditation.
Right. It's about being prepared. And, it's important to remember that relapse happens.
It does. It's part of recovery for a lot of people.
And it doesn't mean you failed.
No, not at all. It's a chance to learn and adjust your treatment plan.
To get back up and keep going.
Exactly. Recovery is a marathon, not a sprint.
There will be bumps along the way.
But it's about learning from them and continuing to strive for a healthier life.
I love that. And I think it's so important to emphasize that there's always hope.
Absolutely. Hope is essential.
It's believing that things can get better, that recovery is possible.
And that life can be beautiful again.
That's what keeps people going.
One step at a time towards a brighter future.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. This has been such an eye-opening conversation, and I really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us.
It's been my pleasure.
And to everyone listening, if you or someone you love is struggling with heroin addiction, please know that you're not alone.
There is help available, and recovery is possible.
Don't give up hope.
Keep fighting, keep learning, and keep reaching out for support.
And just by listening to this, you're taking a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power.
Keep learning, keep growing, and never stop believing in the power of hope and healing.
Thank you for joining us